Greetings, everybody. I am the Starving Martian, and today we are looking at Mars Attacks, issue number 2 of 5 from the original Topps Comics miniseries. Last week we took a look at issue number 1, and we are moving on today with our second issue. I should mention that the story of Mars Attacks, the miniseries, especially the first issue, takes place concurrently with the novel Mars Attacks, Martian Death Trap, and I have done a review of both this and War Dogs of the Golden Horde, the other novel in the series. You can find those in the Mars Attacks playlists, but take place at the same time, same world. Now, if you've seen this cover before, when we were doing Mars Attacks Archives, the trading card series, it was reprinted in trading card form. And according to the back of this card, it says Keith Giffen's cover for issue number 2 of the new Topps Mars Attacks comic. Older fans will recognize this illustration as a canny homage to Harvey Kurtzman, famed for both EC's classic horror and sci-fi comics and Mad Magazine. Of course, I know EC's classics, horror, and sci-fi comics. I know Mad Magazine, but I do not know what they're referencing here, what this is supposedly an homage to. If you do, if you know, please let me know. I would love to be able to check that out myself. But this is the cover for Mars Attacks number 2. Features our good friend, the Army Reserve Roger Bridges. And he's in a bit of a tight situation here, which he actually does get into a bit of a tight situation in the book as well, and that's always good. I hate when the cover has nothing to do with the actual story. So, let's get down to business. Now, as you might recall, in issue number 1, Mars attacked. That's what they do. And everything seemed to be going well for the Martians, bad for the Earthlings. In this particular issue, things are going bad for the Martians and, well, still bad for the Earthlings. As we find out right here on the first page, where Komodoth, the leader of the militant arm of the Martian forces, the Nards, he's taking a ship down to the surface of Earth. He's been monitoring from afar, but situation demands his personal touch. Apparently, dominance stands at only 17.9% of estimated projections, which he finds quite distressing, as would most conquerors. And so they go down to Russia, where they've apparently built their base of operations. And it never specifically says why, but I have to figure. Look at these snowy mountains here. Russia, the Siberia region, things like that. Very cold. The Russian winters have been known to defeat several armies, but Mars, being further away from the sun than us, they probably enjoy the cold. And so I believe that's probably why they got their base here. And it's a rather nice looking base. So Mr. Doth comes by, speaking to some of his subordinates. He orders a meeting. Have the section chiefs gather in my quarters now. And they tell him that there's been complications due to unforeseen environmental problems. We'll get into that in just a second. First, a shot of Brazil, just for fun. And you know what? I like when they do this. They show us glimpses of pieces of the world that the rest of the story doesn't take place in. So none of the people here being trampled by these giant bugs are anyone we have any emotional connection with, but it does help to show that this is indeed a global catastrophe. There is nowhere to go. There is no escape from the Martian forces. And we cut to the Amazon basin. This is a man by the name of Thomas, who we met in the last issue. He works as a logger, and but now he's on the run for his life. He didn't even have time to get dressed, as evidenced by his tighty-whities. And he's dodging giant ants left and right. Interestingly enough, throughout the series, he refers to himself as Lucky Sinner, which makes you think he probably has some deeply held religious beliefs, and they don't really come into play. You don't see him like praying for deliverance and that sort of thing. And I'm kind of glad for that because I find comic books tend to just they don't have good religious people in them. They just tend to have parodies of them, and so I think that's just enough to give us a hint from to some of his personal beliefs, some of his outlook in life, but not enough to dwell on it. So he's escaping from these giant bugs, these ants. He finds himself a nice cave to hide in where he thinks he'll be safe. Little realizing that just around the corner, something evil is hatching. Then we get a nice advertisement for Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, which I've yet to read, but I might catch up with sometime. Anyway, here is this is one of my favorite images from the entirety of the first miniseries. Is just a nice headshot here of Komodoff, who again is not named in the miniseries itself. He's just known as the Commander, or sometimes Commander Prime. He'll be named Komodoff in the next series coming up, but we know that's his name. And he's quite upset to realize that the reason they're having such horrible delays is because the giant insects that they've developed are completely outside of their control. They're not responding at all. They have these control units that are supposed to wrangle them, but they're just not working. And so the giant insects are now a threat to Earthling and Martian alike. So he orders strikes against the insects and, comments on how ironic it is that half their forces now have to be deployed to protecting themselves against the very weapons of destruction they've launched against the Earthlings. And some more good news for him comes in. There's transmissions going around from the president to various other people across the world, but they're having a hard time tracking them because the transmissions are coming from underneath water. They've never had to deal with a liquid mass of this magnitude. And Tech Division projects an 88.9% probability of some manner of concealed threat. And again, I love this expression on his face. When I first reviewed these comics in the beginning of my channel, I did a review of the collected edition. And I said that I didn't particularly care for the way the Martians were drawn. And it's true, I do still prefer the original, the classic Mars Attacks Martians. But these guys, they've grown on me. And I love some of the facial expressions they're able to get out of them. You could just see the frustration building in this guy. And we cut to upstate New York, where Roger Bridges, the gentleman we saw on the cover, he's got a bit of a problem with a nasty mess on his arm that's apparently starting to get gangrenous. He says it's starting to stink something awful. And he's got to find himself a doctor, and after that he's going to throttle the life out of Tugman. Tugman was supposed to go get him a doctor, but never returned. Unfortunately for him, he doesn't bump into a doctor. And this is a very nice full-page spread. And this issue, in particular, has a lot of really nice full-page spreads. And I do quite enjoy these. You get to see a lot more detail than you normally would. And I love the spacesuits on the Martians. I think they're a nice update on the classic while still hitting all the right notes. And if they ever did make another Mars Attacks movie, I wouldn't mind if they updated the spacesuits. Check out those guns, too. It's very nice guns. Speaking of those guns, they make good choff, choff, choff noises when you fire them. And he's able to escape. And the Martians are sent to bring him down. Notice that they say find it, not find him. Just a nice little bit of evidence about what the Martians think about us. We are animals to them. We are, we're an inconvenience. We're taking up prime real estate. So now Boston, Massachusetts, where Nurse Colleen McKay is struggling to survive along with her co-worker and friend Winston. Some of their other co-workers are being taken out in the worst ways imaginable. This guy's getting chewed apart by head lice. This actually reminds me of a scene from Godzilla 1985, where there was a giant louse, sea louse that came off of Godzilla and like killed a bunch of people in a ship. That was really interesting, and I kind of wish they would do something like that again. But anywho, they also look a little bit like shrimp or prawns. So hope you guys weren't about to sit down to lunch. So they're trying to find a safe spot in the hospital. They're thinking about maybe escaping from the hospital. The problem is there's just as many creepy crawlies outside as there are in. Back to New York, where Mr. Bridges is hiding from the Martians. Gets himself upstairs into an apartment where he gets a nice view out a window of fire, death, and devastation. And comes to the conclusion that he is quite royally screwed. Another nice one-page spread here of the Martians over the Vatican City. This looks to me more like a fender bender. I don't think that ship intended to do that. I think it just got a little cocky and flew too close. But either way, I like the way these guys are posing, almost like, you know, for a postcard. It actually reminds me of the Mars Attacks movie when the Martians are invading the Earth and having their pictures taken in front of monuments as they're getting blown up. And I wonder if this is where they got that from. Meanwhile, we have Martians doing house-to-house checks throughout DC, making sure all humans are indeed eliminated. But they miss one. Little Woody Brown is hiding underneath a sofa. And we cut back to Russia, where Komodov is having a confrontation with one of the Payeks. I'm tempted to call this guy Telly and PR, but it's really hard to tell. They all kind of dress alike, the Payeks do. And so, but just because him and PR are rivals and, you know, he's yelling in his face, I'm tempted to think this is PR here. But they're told that something important has been located, and they're not sure what it is. But we can tell that it is indeed a submarine base in a very large 2-page spread here. The Martians don't know what to do with submarines. They don't have this much water on their planet, and so they've never had to deal with vehicles that can go underneath the waves. And this is going to be a problem for them, and it's going to be Earth's one great and perhaps only hope for survival. Boom. And that about wraps it up for issue number 2 of Mars Attacks, the miniseries from Top. So we see the storyline is progressing. The humans are doing what they can to survive. The Martians are encountering problems and endeavoring to overcome them. And we'll catch up with you next week with issue number 3 and see what happens from there. But until then, this has been the Starving Martian. We'll catch up with you then. Have a good one and keep watching the skies.